Welcome to Mysterious Goings On. We're going to get right to the show after these messages.
Hi, this is Justin Connor, director of The Golden Age, and you're listening to the podcast Mysterious Goings On.
With the success of Marie Kondo, a new Netflix documentary, and hundreds of blogs and YouTube videos on minimalism, it's clear that it's more than just a trend. And in a time of climate change and on the heels of, well, actually still in the midst of a pandemic, people are looking for new ways to live well and more meaningful lives. And minimalism is meeting that need. Consuming less may already be an environmental and personal priority, but Becca Ehrlich contends that minimalism can be much more. In her new book, Christian Minimalism, Simple Steps for Abundant Living, she explores the direct connection between minimalism and our faith journey. I am so excited to learn more. You guys can't see me, but Becca can, and behind me, she will see it's very evident I'm into lots of things, clutter, books, knickknacks, so I'm going to have to talk to her about how that may be affecting my own spiritual journey. Becca, welcome to Mysterious Goings On.
Thanks so much. It's good to be here.
I'm getting very uncomfortable just looking at your pristine white background with these little postage stamped photos or art on the walls. As you can see, I have a long way to go. And now, of course, being a pastor, I know you're not judging me, but I'm judging myself.
Well, some conviction may not be a bad thing, so.
Oh my goodness. All right. I want to establish, so you are a pastor in Philadelphia, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. All right. And I just love it if you could kind of walk us through your journey here. Where did this come from? When did you become the Christian minimalist?
Yeah, I was the opposite of a minimalist. I will say that. I was addicted to online shopping. I was living in ways that no one would ever consider me a minimalist. I think they would probably have called me a maximalist if they were using a label. I used shopping as a bonding thing with friends and family. I was completely the opposite. And I was playing around on Netflix one day. And you know how they suggest things. I watch a lot of documentaries, and they suggested the original documentary on minimalism. And I'd never heard of minimalism. I didn't know what it was. And so I was like, well, it's only an hour and 15 minutes. So if it's bad, it's only an hour and 15 minutes of my life. So I started watching it, and basically my life changed. I was like, oh my gosh, this is something I need to do. And so my husband came home from running errands, and I was like, you have to watch this with me. And he was like, he was not excited, because I think he realized it meant change. And so we watched it together, and he said, I think you're right. I think this is really showing us that we need to live more minimally. And minimalism isn't just about stuff, right? It's a whole lifestyle and worldview. So it was basically shifting how we'd been living and how we had seen things in the world. And we did it together. It's really great if you can do it with someone. If not, that's okay too. But it was helpful to have someone on the journey. And that's how it all got started. I realized that a lot of what minimalism says is important. So minimalism is a focus on the aspects of life that matter most and intentionally removing everything else. And for me, that was in line with my Christian faith of spirituality and the teachings of Jesus. And so I said, you know what? I can't be the only one who wants to talk about this in depth. And I looked around, this was the end of 2017, and there were a couple articles or blog posts or YouTube videos, but like nothing in real depth about connecting Christianity and minimalism. And so I was like, well, I can't be the only one. So I started the blog, and at first it was like, 5 of my closest friends and their cats. But then people started discovering it, and it's something that people are interested in, which is great.
So here, let me just dive right into one of the big questions I have, though, is how does in your philosophy, how do things, whether they be as we discuss materialistic things, or perhaps maybe personal obsessions or things that people are consumed with. Let's say, for example, what if I'm consumed within the NFL, and my every Sunday is consumed with that? Does that count as something that might be a candidate for some minimalistic pare down?
It could. It all depends. So you're trying to focus on what's most important. So if NFL stuff is very important to you, then that would be something that you would pare down to focus on. So it's funny because there's a lot of myths around minimalism, and that like, oh, you can't be into things or you can't collect things or whatever. Well, no, it's about making sure that your life focuses on the most important things. And so that means using your time, energy, and resources on those most important things. Now, if your NFL stuff, you're doing it by yourself and you're avoiding family and friends, maybe that may not be a great thing. But if a lot of times, like NFL stuff, it connects you to people, right? Like
it does, yeah. Right.
You're watching games with people, and so in which case that would like kill two birds with one stone with things that you're focusing on.
That's a great point, because I think you hit it on the head there, Becca. Is that so? I think some people fear this because they think, oh, they're going to take something I love away from me. And I've heard this said, and not in these terms, but close enough. Well, if God is so awesome, how can anything come between myself and the Supreme Being? I mean, he is the Supreme Being, so but obviously that's not completely true, is it? That it's not. I don't mean about the Supreme Being. I mean about how things can get in the way of your relationship with God. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%. So we have free will, and so we're gonna do things and make decisions based on how we want to use our time, energy, and resources. And those things can get us closer to God, or take us away from God, or take us away from things that are important, like relationships and self-care and living out our purpose in life, those sort of things. So minimalism is really about paring everything down and culling your life down so that you can focus on what's most important.
I see my life as kind of this funnel as I get older. I'm in my 50s now, and things are starting to become apparent. And one of the things that's most apparent is that I probably have, well, I mean, who knows, maybe not, but I probably have fewer days ahead than I do behind me, and the time becomes this most precious thing to me. I don't really care about money as long as I'm comfortable and pay our bills and we can eat and all that stuff. That's fine. I'm more consumed with, am I spending the right amount of time with my 12-year-old daughter? Am I being a good steward to my community? I know for a fact I've neglected my spiritual life for the past few years, and I have a lot of reasons to do that, and that's not what we're talking about, but I'm also refocusing and thinking about that. So I was very intrigued when I learned about what you're doing here with Christian minimalism, in the sense that there's there's something that I am constantly searching for, Becca, and it's clarity. And I don't always see the road ahead. Any thoughts on clarity as we get older and how this Christian minimalism might be helpful?
Yeah, well, one of the things I like to say is that it's not generational. I think most people think minimalism and they think, oh, that's for young people when they're starting out and they don't have all the stuff,
It's easier probably.
Right, yeah, obviously it's easier at that point, but it really is good for everyone at all stages of life, especially if you find yourself in that sandwich generation. Like you and I, where, you have family members that are getting older that maybe they pass away, and then you
Right.
see the amount of stuff you have to go through, and you're like, well, I'm not going to do that to my people,
Exactly.
So I will say that, and a lot of times as people get older, they do realize like what's most important. I think when you're younger, you're starting out, you're maybe just living life and not really thinking too philosophically around meaning of life and what you want to spend your time and energy and resources on. And as you get older, especially if you downsize, if you have an empty nest or whatever,
Right.
It tends to be the time where people are like, oh, I really should be focusing my life on the most important things. Maybe not necessarily on these things that I said yes to because I felt obligated or whatever. That happens a lot, right? So
Indeed.
So yeah, so I think you're right. As we get older, it's a natural progression to do that. But I think also younger folks can benefit as well.
I think so. I have a friend, she's a realtor. And she tells me she sees this cycle over and over, the empty nesters. She says it's almost 50-50. I said, what? She says either they completely downsize, move down as a couple, or they get divorced. She said it's every time it's one or the other. It's sad on one side and interesting on the other, she says. And by the way, I'm good, and we have a few more years. We have a few more years till the kid's out. But no, but the point being that these generational things do happen. But I do. The other thing she said, the thing that twigged on me when you were speaking about this, was that she also said we just bought this house a couple of years ago, and she watched me clearing out all this stuff before we moved, and she's like, you know, you got to get rid of this stuff, man. You don't need all this stuff in your life, you know. And I got to say, I think I've held on to stuff because I've got issues with my childhood, and I went through this period in my 40s where I got on eBay and bought all the toys from childhood that I wanted and couldn't get. Isn't that corny and silly? But I did that, right? And now I'm holding on to them, and they're just in boxes. And it's like somebody could get joy out of this, right? Isn't that the Kondo thing? If there's no joy, I don't mean to ramble on, but you've got me really thinking about this, Becca. You see some parallels there?
Yeah, a little bit. And we can have a total conversation about Marie Kondo. I wrote a blog post that went like semi-viral about Marie Kondo.
Right.
We can totally have a conversation about that too. But I mean, if those add value to your life, mm-hmm. and you're enjoying them, and it's something that you consider a focal point for your life, I think like collecting, for example, like if that's doing that for you, then it's not wrong, right? It's mm-hmm. something that's adding value to your life and you can keep going. But if you're sitting there and you're like, you know what, that served me in a certain part of my life,
right? And
now it's not really adding value to my life anymore, and I'd rather someone else enjoy it, then that might be the point where you're like, I think I need to let this go.
I think that's true. I would like to talk about your blog, because the blog did lead to the book, and believe it or not, we are going to talk about the book here. Let's get to it. But I was very struck by a very recent blog post you wrote called "Stockpiling in a Crisis." Mm-hmm. And Becca, I'm going to tell you something straight. I did not expect this from you in this, just my preconceived notion. But basically, I'll just lay into this, and maybe you could kind of give the dip. But you talk about, as a pastor, how you had your share of eaten at your share of church potlucks. Could you just explain what you say in the post? I really think it's important.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about church potlucks over the course of the pandemic. Because we can't have them, because like you can't have a bunch of people in a room eating and touching things, and obviously. But two, because every potluck I've ever been at, there's two types of people for the most part. There's the people who go through the line and take a small amount of things, like enough for themselves, but because they want to make sure that the people behind them have enough. And then other people just go through the line and take as much as they can fit on their plate and not really think about the people behind them. And so I've thought a lot about that when we've gone through spurts of stockpiling during the pandemic. So like, obviously when it got started, there was toilet paper and medical stuff and wipes, which was nuts. And then recently there was gas. There's been some other things that people stockpiled over the pandemic time. And I really truly believe that those potluck categories are very similar to what's happening with stockpiling in a crisis, where there's people who are like, you know what, I'll take a couple extra, but I want to make sure that there's enough for others, as opposed to I'm going to get as much as I can get my hands on, and I don't care if others have access to it or not. And it's been really interesting because as a person who writes from a faith perspective, I get a wide range of viewers from that faith perspective. And so people of different flavors of Christianity have different reactions to that. And certain flavors of Christianity are like, well, I have a pantry in my house and I give it to my friends and family, which is valid. But then also that means you're getting to choose who has access to those things. Like you're basically playing God and deciding who has access, as opposed to, I'm just going to buy an extra one or two of things, and then anyone in this store has access to it.
That's a great point. Well, and the thing that struck me when I read this is that very thing. I mean, the grotesque photos of people with just tons of toilet paper of all things. And I mean, at Costco with stacks of it, I'm like, do you have a problem? What's going on? I mean, do you have issues? Maybe you should be in the Imodium aisle. I don't know. I just.
Amazing.
I just wonder. But you see that, and then did you see Becca on social and online people filling up plastic gas bags with gasoline and putting them? Okay, besides just the sheer panic and greed or whatever you want to call that. I'm sorry, I hate to say this. It's stupid. You could kill yourself doing this. But I think those are extreme metaphors, though, to what you're talking about putting one's needs before others. And this is the point I'm trying to get to, a tortured point here. I'm so sorry. But when I first heard about Christian minimalism, my first thought, and you could reach through the screen and bop me one. I thought, gosh, that sounds cold. Minimalism, it sounds cold to me. And I'm wondering, has it been difficult for you, or because you talk about the different various flavors of Christianity, has it been difficult for you to try to get people over the hump and understand this is not a coldness at all? This is actually opening things up. Has it been a tough sell? Yeah,
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things I end up talking about a lot is like people hear minimalism and they think joyless, Spartan, whatever. And in reality, it's a more abundant life, because you're making sure that you're focusing on what's most important. And so you're filling your life with the things that are most important and bring you joy and are enjoyable, and give you that abundant life, as opposed to spending time, energy, and resources on things that don't matter. Like, I use the example a lot of like getting sucked into social media. Social media itself and spending time on social media, not a problem, right? But we've all been there where we look at the clock and we're like, oh my gosh, an hour of my life is gone because I was just scrolling through social media. And that's not necessarily a great use of time and energy. And so finding ways to be more intentional with how we use social media is something that minimalists would do. So it's not about taking away things we enjoy. Right. It's about making sure our lives are filled with the things that we enjoy and other things aren't taking away from that.
I love that. Now, you've done some things. You don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk. You actually went on a year-long shopping fast, with, I believe, one exception, I think I've heard that or in your research. How did that go?
Yeah, weirdly, it was easier than I thought it was going to be. And at the same time, it was harder than I thought it was going to be. It was easier in the sense of I prepped myself ahead of time, where I had an approved list of things I could buy. People say I didn't shop for a year, and they're like, oh my gosh. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, I bought food. I bought,
Toilet paper even?
Toilet paper, yes, but only when we ran out. We did not stock away on toilet paper. I bought toiletries, but only when I ran out. And, I bought books because I was doing a degree program at the time. And so I had an approved list of things that I knew I would have to buy over the course of the year that helped me focus on what matters most. And so it was easy in the sense of I didn't have to think about it. But it was hard in the sense of I was breaking the habits of online shopping addiction and bad spending habits and consumer habits that I had fallen into over the years previously. And so it was kind of a both and. And you're right, there was only one exception. I had to break it. So we moved to Philadelphia in that year, and we moved into a 3-story house because, they built up and not out in big cities. And I couldn't carry my laundry over 3 floors. It was too heavy. So I bought a $10 laundry backpack. And trust me, that adds value to my life every time I do laundry here.
Did you get a dopamine hit buying that?
I did not, because it's not like a fun thing. It's like I need this to have clean clothes.
Yeah, that's true. Although I had to go to CVS to pick up some things the other day, and I think I went a little overboard because they have these, besides the shampoo I needed and some other things for a trip I'm taking, they had these dollar boxes of Lorna Doone cookies. It's like, Alex, how many boxes of Lorna Doone cookies do you need? But it's only $1. But anyway, you know what? That just kind of shows you just kind of where my spending lies. But Becca, talking about that, I would love to talk about the book itself now. Is the book kind of is it a guide to how to become a Christian minimalist, or how does it structured? How's it laid out? What should people expect if they pick up your book?
Yeah, so what I really try to do both in the blog and in the book is do a good balance of both the theory and the practice. So like, why is living as a minimalist helpful? And then how do we do that practically? So you get both and with the book and the blog, which is a lot of fun because there's like literally like bullet points in the book at some points where it's like, here's some ways you can try to like pare down your schedule, And then there's other times where you're like, let's talk about what it means to interact with other people and relationships. Like, what does it look like to make relationships a focus of your life as something that's most important? So there's both and there. And in the back, I always try to tell people this, there's a read and reflect section in the back, like know that exists. So that, because some people read to the end, I mean, it's in the table of contents, of course, but people read to the end and they're like, oh my gosh, there's like discussion questions in the back. That would have been so cool to know when I was reading it. So know that there are, and you can use those for obviously personal reflection, or you can read the book in a group. And
I was going to say, that sounds like a great, even if it's not part of your church family doing it, maybe just your reading circle, that sounds like a great idea. You can do that. Are you hearing about groups doing that?
Yeah, actually a bunch of congregations, and then just groups of friends that are like, this is cool, we want to go on this journey together, are doing it. And that's why I included that section, because there's been a lot of nonfiction books that I've gotten to the end and I was like, man, I wish there were like discussion questions or like something at the back that I could use with other people when we read this together. So that was why I put it in.
I love that. Well, just kind of jumping around here, though, are there some basic steps you would say? Well, I guess step one, buy the book would be helpful, or at least start reading your blog. But hey, folks, don't take the minimalism to 100%. You need a new book in your life, obviously. So, Becca, what would be some initial steps? What would you recommend people do if they're interested in getting started on this?
Yeah, well, before I do that, just so you know, the ebook version is available. So if you don't want to add to physical clutter, you can do the ebook version. So.
But doing the thing in the ebook, you'll have to just kind of use a notepad, I guess, to take the reflection. Okay, but come on, folks, we can all do that. Come on, we're all big people. Let's do this. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Technology now, right? Especially during the pandemic. So one of the things I always say is find your personal why. So obviously there's general reasons and whys as to why we want to live more minimally. Obviously it's to focus on what's most important and cut through like physical, emotional, spiritual, mental clutter to really pare down and focus on what's most important. But everyone has personal whys. So my personal why when I was going through it was I wanted more time with loved ones and for my degree program. That was my big thing, because I was spending my time and energy and resources on online shopping for things I didn't even need or want, which messed up our, it wasn't the best way to use money. And then also it added to physical clutter, which was not great either. And so that's the first thing I always tell people. And then the second thing is to start small. So not everyone should start with physical stuff. It's just a way some people do, because that's easy to see tangible results. And it's one of the things that they have the most of. Some people start with their time commitments. Some people start with how they use social media or media in general. It really just depends on where you are and what you need to minimize first. But we started with stuff because that's just where we were at the time. And we literally did a drawer a day. So it was like 10, 15 minutes, clean out a drawer, and we were done for the day. And then when we had like a ton of time on a Saturday or whatever, we'd tackle the storage unit that we had at the time. But like starting small that way was super helpful, because it felt like it was in bite-sized pieces and we could accomplish that. But at the same time, it actually made us see results pretty quickly and helped motivate us to continue.
Now, and I'll put you on the spot here. Did you donate stuff? Did you sell it, or both, or how'd you make it disappear?
Yeah, I make it disappear. I waved a magic wand. No, I wish. No, I would say we donated probably about 95% of it.
Yeah.
Because it's just, you have to sort of balance out like how much time and energy you have to put into selling something. Is it worth the money you get back? But also like, we just knew that there were people that could use this stuff now, and we wanted that to be available to them. And then like I would say a few percentage points were things that were worn out or broken or whatever, and we just threw away because, whatever. And then there were a couple things where I knew like there was a person in my life that could use it at the time because they needed it. But I would say like 95% we just full out donated.
Yeah, we've been doing that as well for we thought we were done when we moved. No, and we still have all this stuff, and we just donate. There's a local organization. They have a thrift shop in it, but the actual organization helps people get back on their feet after whatever reason and gives them a place to live, that kind of thing. And that's fulfilling for us in a lot of ways to do that. But I agree with you. And of course, I don't know about you in Philadelphia. I don't know, but there's also the curbside pickup we have here in town, where you have something, you just kind of put it on your curb, and if she's nodding, I'll be quiet. You do this, don't you?
Yeah, it's funny. We haven't done it recently because when we pared down to 60% of our stuff, when we did the big the big minimizing and the switch to this lifestyle, we were moving from Gettysburg to Philadelphia, so we didn't have that option. It wasn't really a thing, so we gave it to an outreach program. But now, like we just pared down. We're moving to New York City, which is a whole different level of minimalism, by the way. If you're moving to Manhattan. Yeah. So, and we don't live in a huge house in Philadelphia. We live in a 1,700 square foot house, but moving from that to a 2-bedroom Manhattan apartment is a very different mindset. And so we are actually going through this again right now. And we actually have bins of just kids' books. Like we had inherited all our kids' books when my parents and his parents had cleaned out their houses, and we're like, here's all your kids' books. And then they just sat in boxes in our basement. And so we're like, okay, well, we're going through the adoption process. Obviously we want some, but we're not going to keep them all, because where would we put them in a Manhattan apartment? So we have these boxes and boxes and boxes of kids' books that we're just going to put out on the curb and put free on it, and hope that like lots of neighbors get really fun books to read with their children.
That's it. That's such a great thing. And I don't know, I feel I don't mean it in the sense that I'm a great person because I donated or gave away. I just feel better getting it out of my life, but also with the knowledge that it went to somebody who actually wanted it and needed it. Just pairing that with other feelings I've expressed is just at the stage in my life when I realize how much money. Now, I'm not going to say wasted, okay, Becca? I'm going to say how much money I've spent, though, on things that were completely superfluous to my existence and to making me a better human and all that stuff. But I'll add the corollary to that, which is not everything you buy has to make you a better human being, but it's nice that it does.
Yeah. And that's why I always use the phrase add value to your life, because that can be many different things. That can be beauty, right? It's being minimalist doesn't mean you don't have art on your walls or anything. Obviously, I have art on my walls. I'm pointing; people can't see, but it means being intentional with what you bring into your life and making sure that things are adding value to your life. So it's less about, oh, I'm just not going to buy things at all, and more about I'm going to be intentional with what I bring into my life and what it's adding to my life.
Put on your pastor hat here, and I'm going to ask you something. And I'm not. There, she just did. I love it. You were so good. And I'm not being necessarily critical, but I want to ask you about religion, and I want to ask you about this. Some people might be listening to this and thinking, "Oh, that's great," but you go to these churches that are so ornate and they waste so much space. And there's, some churches. I believe you come from 2 different faith traditions with your parents, I believe, and you're in a completely different one from them. That's up to you to discuss if you wish. But one of those faith traditions I know has got a very, very big deal with massive edifices and churches and lots of, and it's worth a lot of money and all that. And I just wonder what you say to people who are like, well, why should I, pare down if a lot of churches refuse to? And the other thing too, the modern stuff too, the mega churches, they're huge. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So what I would say is just like personal budgets, you look at a church budget and you can see what's most important to that congregation. And so if worship space and having a worship space that helps people experience God is a priority, then that is where they're going to place a lot of their time, energy, and resources. So, and what that looks like for each tradition is going to look very different. So I would argue that having a cathedral that's beautiful and helping people experience God's presence can be just as minimalist as a bare bones, like front shopkeeping, like what are they called? You know what I'm talking about, like in a shopping center, like a
strip mall, like a strip mall place.
Yeah. Either can be minimalist if it's adding value, and it's what they're focusing on, what matters most. Now, I'm not saying that like everything needs to go into the worship space, right. But a lot of times the things that are most ornate in different flavors of Christianity are like the high points of the worship service. So like where the word is preached from, and where the sacraments happen, like at the altar or like at a baptismal font. And so like those ornate things are cluing people into what is important to this congregation.
Nice. Okay. Very good. Good. It's a great answer. Because I have a dear friend who goes to mass every day, mm-hmm. and very obviously intensely involved with his church. And he, at one time, we were in Curacao for a conference. We worked together, and we stopped by this lovely Catholic church in Curacao. We had some free time. He wanted to sit, and no one had ever done this. I'm not Catholic. He had never done this. He explained why cathedrals and why Catholic churches are laid out the way they are. Mm-hmm. Becca, I had no idea that it's the Stations of the Cross. Is that right? See, and here I am thinking, oh, man, this is pretty big, ornate deal here. I mean, seriously, can't we feed the poor with all this? And he explains it, and then you just reinforce that, because there are some really good reasons why this is done that way. Yeah,
and I will say, obviously, like churches could learn to utilize resources in different ways. So I'm not like condoning like, okay, let's put all our money into like gold-plated whatever, But I will say that there is some intention around that in most congregations. Now, other congregations not so much, but in most places, especially historical cathedrals, like there was a lot of time and energy and thought process placed into where they used the ornate and resources.
Right. Well, let me, as we kind of get close to winding up here, I'd love to ask you this though. And I don't mean this in a punny way, but you are evangelical about this Christian minimalism, and you take your opportunities for media apparently to talk about this and express these things. Can you tell us a little bit about your adventures that are chronicled on HBO Max of all places?
Oh gosh, yes. I will say that when I participated in that retreat, I did not talk about Christian minimalism. That was not the reason I ended up on that, but I lived as a Christian minimalist while on that retreat. And I think like if you know that about me and you watch it, that's apparent, especially with some of my other castmates who are also very awesome, but have very different worldviews on that, I think. So I went on a 3-week retreat, and then it was filmed 24/7, which, by the way, if you have no idea what that's like until you're living it, it is not for the faint of heart to be filmed 24/7. And it was aired first on TBS. It's named Lost Resort, and now it's on HBO Max streaming. So you can watch it on demand on TBS or you can get it on Amazon Prime Video as well. It's 10 episodes. I always try to remind people that you can't show all the things in reality TV. So like each of the episodes encompasses at least 2 days, sometimes 3. It's like 2 to 3 days in one episode. So just know that there was a lot of other stuff that happened and a lot of other spiritual practices we did on the retreat that didn't make the cut just because they didn't have enough time.
Well, what was if you don't mind, if you explore just a little bit more, what was the thrust of it? It was a retreat, and why were they interested in filming it?
So there's been a lot of push, I guess I would say, in alternative wellness and alternative healing and retreats around that in over the last decade or so. And there hasn't really been any huge media focus on that, like specifically on people going on a retreat and following their journeys that way. Like there's been like documentaries and things, but there's never been like, hey, we're going to take these 8 to 9 people and put them in Costa Rica and have them for 3 weeks go on this retreat where they experience alternative methods of healing and wellness and see what happens. And they, everyone on the retreat had different reasons why they were there. And so it was really cool because there were a lot of, there were some things that we did that I knew about, like sweat lodge or Reiki or things like that I'd heard of that had never really experienced. And there were other things that I had no idea existed. I was just like, okay, we're doing this now. This is cool. So there's definitely like a fish out of water element, which is why I'm sure I got picked for it, because you're having a pastor do some weird things.
Oh my! Well, Costa Rica is on my list. Should I visit there? Is that a great place to visit?
Oh, I love Costa Rica. It was
Yeah?
awesome. I want to go back when I'm not being filmed 24/7.
When you're not, I was going to say, you know what? I'm open when I retire to be filmed 24/7. But you're probably just going to see a guy walking on the beach, fishing, drinking beer and cocktails, and reading books. So there you go. But pretty boring, but I'll do it. I'll do it
That
for
sounds
free.
lovely.
Just pay my way. I'll do it. Hey, Becca, this has been so exciting to hear about this, and interesting and thought-provoking. And I can tell you, you've definitely changed, not my mind necessarily, but you definitely changed my perception of this, and I appreciate that so much. So again, where can people find the book?
Yes. So Christian Minimalism, Simple Steps for Abundant Living can be found pretty much wherever books are sold. I mentioned before you can get the ebook. It's on Kindle. So check it out there if you want to get the e-version as well. And also the blog, christianminimalism.com. I still continue to write there regularly.
Yeah, and you've got some guest posts and other stuff here. And I really do recommend the blog. And I believe you can sign up, right, for updates through the blog, that kind of thing.
You can, yes.
Yeah, there will be links in the show notes for all of this stuff, folks. And I'll tell you what, if you do get the book and you review it on Amazon, say you heard about it here first on Mysterious Goings On. Again, though, Pastor Becca Ehrlich is a Christian minimalist. She practices these principles daily, and she and her husband got rid of 60% of their personal possessions, did a year-long shopping fast, and moved into a smaller home. And now they're moving into a smaller apartment in New York City. Sounds like an adventure. Again, she took part in the reality show The Lost Resort. It's just currently airing on HBO Max. Pastor Becca Ehrlich, thank you so much for joining us here on Mysterious Goings On.
Yes, this was a blast. Thanks for having me.
Okay, who has a podcast, then writes an ebook about podcasting and doesn't do an audiobook version of it? Well, not me. I've done that. In fact, I'm very excited to tell you, dear listeners, that the podcast option, my recent top-selling ebook on podcasting, my journey through 15 years as a podcaster, broadcaster, host, guest, and observer, is now an Audible audiobook. It's really, really, really exciting for me to be able to present this to you through Audible, which is available on Amazon.com, where the ebook link is as well. And in this fast listen, my experience comes to you through stories, practical tips, and advice from my hundreds of hours as a guest, producer, podcast host, and more. And the podcast option, if I say so myself, is mandatory listening for those new to podcasting, and it should be a welcome addition to veteran podcasters' library. So check out the podcast option read by yours truly, Alex Greenwood, or as they say there, the J. Alexander Greenwood, because that's my pen name, and that's a long story, which if you dig through my podcast, eventually you'll find out what that means. But the point being today, the podcast option is available now as an Audible audiobook. I've got a link in the show notes to make it easy for you. Please do me a favor, go get that audiobook. Or if audiobooks aren't your bag, there's also a link for you to get it as an ebook. Again, the podcast option. I certainly hope you will choose it. Thanks so much for listening to Mysterious Goings On. Don't forget we have a complete archive of all of our interviews, monologues, updates, live readings, dead readings. All of that stuff is available at mgopod.com. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the usual suspects. Please join us there. Again, don't forget, mgopod.com also has links where to find me on social media and how to get in touch in case you want to be a guest here on the show. Well, I think it's time that I move on for this week, but until next time, keep reading.